Hey, my name is Lindsay Roberts, and this is a little bit about my story. My story is one of resilience, persistence, endurance, and I'm an overcomer. At the age of 4, my family experienced a domestic violence situation, and it was a homicide suicide, and it turned my complete life that I knew all upside down. From that moment forward, I would then struggle with generalized anxiety disorder for the next 26 years. Shortly after, my aunt was murdered by my uncle and he took his own life. My parents divorced and the world as I knew it was uprooted. I would spend the next 13 years in and out of varsity sports, honor roll. I did all the right things, and then at the age of 18, I suffered what I consider an identity crisis, and at the age of 18, I make the conscious decision to get high. That would turn into just socially, and then before I would know it, it would become a habit and then a necessity in my life. I would spend the next 13 years running from myself, in and out of abusive relationships, struggling with mental health, severe depression, generalized anxiety, and obsessive compulsive disorder to the point that I ritualized. In 2010, I decided to seek mental health treatment, and it worked for a while, but due to complications with my therapist, I was no longer able to continue those services. In 2012, I hit what I thought was my rock bottom when my family conducted an intervention with me for my drug addiction, and at that point I realized the elephant's out of the room, I can breathe, and I was relieved. I sought treatment. I had to wait 3 weeks for a bed. Due to my position at the time, I was a state employee. I chose to go out of state. I went to rehab, completed 28 days, did amazing. Learned a lot about myself in 3 weeks, but I relapsed as soon as I got in the car on my own prescription medication. At the time, I did not realize it was a relapse, but looking back, it very much was. I came home to the same people, places, and things. I came back to a new relationship that I had entered before entering into rehab, and before I knew it, I relapsed again. I didn't know it at the time, but I was in the most severe domestic violence situation that I had ever been in to this point in my life, and that just fueled my addiction and my mental health. In May of 2015, I had a break in my mind. I quit my job, I quit my relationship, and I chose to get high with the wrong person. When I got high with the wrong person, it led me to things that I never imagined and introduced me to a whole new world and a life and people. I was soon in the middle of things that I don't want to even speak about, but I was involved with people from out of state. Unknowingly, I was being drugged. I was pimped out while incoherent, and they had a plan to kill me and end my life. And I was just trying to not feel sad. So in August 26, 2015, I voluntarily checked myself into a psychiatric rehabilitation center. It was in that place that I realized that I was my biggest issue. I had a counselor that reached out to me while I was in there, and she helped me to recognize some things about myself and my life decisions. And I went back to my room to reflect, and I heard my name over the intercom, and I went up to the nurse's station, and the lady said, "Your therapist wants to know if you want this Bible." And I'm a person of faith. I grew up in the church, but I had strayed away. I took the Bible and I just clung to it because it was like the only hope that I had in such a desperate place. I went back to my room and I opened the front, and there were verses in there leading me to scripture on temptation. And with every verse, I just kept feeling hope. So I said a prayer and I said, "All right, God, if I'm going to do this, I've tried everything known to man. If I'm going to do this, I'm going to read your word from the beginning." And I started in the book of Genesis. And I got to Genesis 2 and 7, and I'm going to paraphrase. And it says that God made man in his image and breathed life into his nostrils. And the man became a living soul. I'd always known that scripture, but I never knew that it was through the nostrils. And in that moment, I had the deepest level of conviction, because for 13 years, I had snorted anything and everything I could get my hands on. So in that moment, in the middle of a psych ward, I got down on my hands and knees and I just prayed out to God. And I begged him to deliver me from every addiction. And I just started naming things. Forgive me for this, forgive me for that relationship, forgive me for this situation, for that lie. And anything that I thought that I was carrying, I word vomited and I released in that moment. 5 days later, I walked out of that facility And I've not smoked a cigarette. I've not been treated for depression. I've not been treated for anxiety. I've not done a drug, and I've not drank a sip of alcohol. That was 9 years ago this month. What my life looks like today is I've lived more life in 9 years than I have the previous 30. I'm a domestic violence survivor. I'm a cancer survivor. I'm a recovery coach, a peer support, very heavily involved in outreach ministry, specifically children's ministry. And today my life is beautiful.